Welcome to Lecture 2, Topic 4, a continuation of our discussion of the free exercise of religion. In this lecture, we're going to be looking at two things. First, we're going to talk about how the court defines religion, and next, we'll look at what is known as the belief action distinction. So let's get started. Religious practice receives constitutional protection through the Free Exercise Clause in the Bill of Rights. Other practices do not necessarily receive constitutional protections. And so when it comes to the court and determining whether or not somebody's religious actions receive First Amendment protections, one of the things that the court has to consider is whether or not the religion that is motivating those actions is actually a religion, or is it an excuse, a sham religion that you say it's motivated by religion, but you're really just wanting to get some benefits. And your textbook uses a really fun example of that. They talk about prisoners who form a religion, and components or key features of the religion is that they can only eat filet mignon and drink Cabernet Sauvignon wine. Sign me up for that religion, right? And so the question is, well, how do you know whether or not that is a practice that is truly motivated by religious beliefs, or is it just a sham religion that's used in order to get these delicious consumables while incarcerated? Well, it's important for the court to be able to define religion, because you have to know what a religion is in order to make sure that non-religious practices aren't getting protections from the First Amendment when they should not. Now, here's an example that I'll use of a practice that is motivated by religious beliefs and one that's not. Okay, and that's driver license photos and head coverings. Now, there's two pictures here. Here's in the top here. This is me at a Brewers game with my husband, and I'm wearing my Brewers cap. Okay, I am a huge Brewers fan. I go to what used to be Miller Park, but it's now AmFam Park. It's, my house of worship, right? I worship baseball. Okay, and I wear my hat. And I'm going to say, hey, I love the Brewers so much that I want to wear my hat in a driver's license photo. Okay. Well, I might really love baseball, but it's pretty clear that, like, it's not a religion, or is it? We're going to find out, right? But another individual, and here is an adherent of Islam. Some members of Islam, some Muslim women wear head coverings, and that's known as a hijab. And that because of their religious beliefs, they want their head to be protected from the gaze of others. Okay, that their hair and their appearance is sacred, and it should only be peered upon by those who they have close relationships with. And so Muslim women want to be able to wear their hijab in their state driver license photos. So, the state has a prohibition against wearing head coverings for good reason, right? That when you have your state ID, you have your driver's license, it's used as a form of identification. When cops pull you over for speeding and they look at your driver's license and it doesn't look like the person who's driving, kind of wonder, does this person even have a license, etc. So it's important that in a driver's license or a state ID that you can really see the person. And head coverings can obstruct the appearance of an individual. So me wearing my Brewers cap in my photo is gonna make me look different than if I don't have my cap on. But in the case of a Muslim woman, it's a religious practice, right? She's practicing her religion by wearing her hijab, and so that should the state make an exemption for the wearing of a head covering as it relates to the hijab. But I might come back and say, hey, wait a second, my practice and worship of the Brewers is just as deep as, somebody who follows Islam. And so I should be wearing my cap as well. And so the problem is how to differentiate between legitimate religious practices and sham religions, right, or illegitimate. And that's a question that comes from the court. And let's look at how they have tackled this issue. So, Pastafarianism, real or sham religion? Yep, you got it right. There is a picture of an individual on their Massachusetts driver's license who's wearing a colander on their head. And I don't know if you guys cook, but if you do, when you cook up some pasta, you drain it in a colander, okay? And that person wanted to wear their colander in their driver's license ad, or driver's license picture. And so you might look at that and go, oh my goodness gracious, like Pastafarianism, is that a religion? I mean, is it a joke? Is it just trying to make fun of driver's license or what? I mean, should the demand that you wear a colander on your head because of your religious beliefs, is that protected by the First Amendment? Well, when the early on, the court would not have considered this a true religion. Um, but today the court does. I'm not making that up. And so, how did the court get there? And so, in this case, with this woman who wore the colander in her driver's license in the state of Massachusetts, she was initially told that she needed to take it off, that you couldn't wear any head coverings, and she said, "No, no, no. This is my religious belief. That Pastafarianism is a secular religion that reviews the existence of a flying spaghetti monster to be just as probable as the existence of the Christian God." And so that she's wearing that colander as an expression of her religious beliefs. And if other people get to wear their head coverings during their get an exemption for their driver's license photos, then she should too. And she won that case in Massachusetts. Now, that case hasn't come to the Supreme Court. It probably never will. But you'll see that given the way that the court now defines religion, it makes perfect sense that Pastafarianism would meet that definition. So let's see how the court got there. Initially, the court defined religion very narrowly. And there are two cases that deal with this. One is the case Davis v. Beeson, and the other we'll talk about later, which is the United States v. Reynolds. Both of these cases have to do with Mormons, also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. And a provision or a belief of Mormons is they believe in polygamy. And so when the religion was founded in the mid part of the 19th century, in the 1840s, I think it was, that Joseph Smith said that if you're a Mormon, you have to practice polygamy. You have to men have to marry as many wives as they can, and they have to have as many children as they can. This was a belief about the importance of family within the Mormon faith, and also about their understanding of the afterlife. So in this case, Davis, he lived in the Idaho Territory, and a federal law was passed that said that polygamy was a felony, and if you wanted to vote, you had to swear that you were not a polygamist or a bigamist. Davis, as a Mormon, he did practice polygamy, and he swore the oath saying that he wasn't a polygamist because he really wanted to vote. And he was convicted for violating this federal law. And he was convicted of the crime of lying under oath. But this case is important because it tells us how the court initially defined religion. They said that religion in the context of the First Amendment refers primarily to one's views of his relationship to his creator. And so they did say that Mormonism was a religion, but they said that their practices could be criminalized or prohibited, such as the practice of polygamy. And so from this early definition, religion is about recognizing the existence of God from the court's point of view. So if you don't believe in God, then what your belief is not a religion. And also you have to have viewpoints regarding your relationship to God. So, under this definition, Pastafarianism would not likely be considered a religion because, if anything, Pastafarianism is basically saying that there is no God, that it's just as likely, or, well, it's just as likely that there's a flying spaghetti monster as there is a God. And this isn't about developing a relationship, this Pastafarianism, with the God of the flying spaghetti monster. Okay. So, under this first definition, Pastafarianism would not have received First Amendment protections via the Free Exercise Clause. The court revisits the definition of religion about 50 years later in a case that you write about in your textbook, or that you will read about in your textbook, called United States v. Ballard. And it involves a religion called the I Am movement. So, since Davis, the court has defined religion much more broadly. What this case is about, you read about it in your textbook. It's about this guy, and he's pictured there in the picture along with his wife. So this guy's name is Guy Ballard, and that's his wife, Edna Ballard, and they are the founders of the I Am movement religion. Guy Ballard, he lived in California in the 1930s. He was on a walk in the mountains, and he claims that he was visited by Saint Germain, and that this saint appointed Guy Ballard as the divine messenger on earth for these entities called the Ascended Masters. And Guy Ballard was really moved by this experience, and in response, he starts the I Am movement. As you read in your textbook, that he claims that he needs money so that he can more effectively pursue his supernatural healing practices. And so, in order to do his best job as the divine messenger on earth, well, he's going to need some money for that. And so he uses the United States Postal Service to send money to people, asking them to contribute to the I Am movement so that he can get money, so that he can do a better job being this divine messenger on earth. Well, the U.S. Government thinks that this is mail fraud, that this isn't a real religion, this is a sham religion, and that Guy Ballard is just using the Postal Service in order to defraud people of money, and mail fraud is a federal offense. And so he's charged with mail fraud. What's interesting about this case is the action that the judge takes during his trial. After, when the jury is going to deliberate to see whether or not they're going to convict Guy Ballard of mail fraud, the judge tells the jury, these are the jury instructions. He basically says, look, if you feel that the Ballards truly believe their religion, if they sincerely believe their religion, then you shouldn't convict them. Mm-hmm. But if you don't feel that they were sincere in their beliefs, so then go ahead and convict them. But he said that the jury shouldn't consider whether the truth of the I Am movement. They shouldn't say, well, is it true that Saint Germain came and visited Guy Ballard? Is it true that they're ascended masters, right? Is it true that he needs money in order to, create his healing practices for this religion? He said, don't take into consideration the truth of the religion, but take into consideration the sincerity of the religion. That question about those jury instructions and whether those were proper jury instructions were sent to the Supreme Court for questioning whether or not those were proper jury instructions. And the Supreme Court said yes, that a religion the test for is it a religion is not the truths of the doctrine. And this is what they say in the case, the United States v. Ballard case, but rather the sincerity with which the belief is held. So that if you're asking the question, should this person's actions be protected by the First Amendment, you should look at the sincerity of their beliefs, not the truth of their beliefs. Because when you start drilling down and dialing down on religious truths about the virgin birth and somebody, rising after they've been dead for 3 days, about Noah and an ark and 2 by 2 and all of that, we start looking at the truth. It's sort of like, there's probably evidence finds to the contrary, right? The court said it's not the court's place. It's to determine the truth of religion, but it's if you hold it as a sincere belief, then in their consideration, it is an actual religion. In the 1960s, the court continues to broaden the definition of religion. I will let you read about these cases in the textbook, but U.S. v. Seeger and then Welsh versus the United States, both of these are cases about individuals who want to be exempted from the United States draft. We are at war in that time period in the Vietnam War. And so in the U.S. v. Seeger case, that Seeger said that he was seeking a religious exemption because of his religious beliefs. But when asked the question, does he actually believe in God? He said he really wasn't sure whether he believed in God, but he was religious. And so the question was, well, do you need to believe in God to get an exemption from the draft? And they said, nope, you don't need to believe in God. If your religious belief occupies a place in the believer's life that is parallel to a belief in God, then it should be treated like a religion. Hey, I think I'm coming closer to the religion of baseball, coming closer because maybe baseball occupies the same place in my life as a religion. In Welsh, the question is, does it have to be a religion or could it be an ideology or a political belief? And in Welsh, they expand it even more. Yes, ideologies are protected. If belief systems take the same character as religion, then it is treated as a religion. In this case, pacifism, right? That if pacifism isn't a recognized religion as such, but it doesn't really matter because that belief system plays in a role in a person's life as if it was a religion. And so that brings us back to Pastafarianism. And based on the way that the court defines religion, Pastafarian would fall in the category of religious protections because it's an ideology that plays a role in that person's life and people's life that is on par with religion. So the court provides a very broad, inclusive definition of religion. What I want you to think about, or we can come to office hours and we can talk about that, is like, what are the benefits of this, of such a broad definition? And what are some of the drawbacks of this definition? I mean, if it's broad enough so that it is such a big tent for actions that are considered religious, that and really, should the court even be in the business of deciding what is a religion and what is not? And some religions, like Taoism, that believe in more of like a life force, but not a God or the way, right? Obviously that's going to be recognized as a religion, and it provides this really big tent. But on the other side with the drawbacks, one might wonder whether it makes a mockery of religion. That people who want to wear a colander on their hat, on their head for their driver's license is placed on the same, given the same protections as somebody who wants to wear a hijab or somebody who wants to wear a yarmulke. Kind of makes a mockery of religion in a certain way, maybe to a certain degree. So something to debate, and come by office hours if you are so inclined, and you'll be asked questions like this on the midterm exam. The First Amendment tells us that Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. No law? Is the court going to interpret the free exercise clause literally? Well, as you know, and as you will know from reading the textbook, the court has never used a literal interpretation it has never literally interpreted the free exercise clause. Going back to Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist Association, you'll read about that in the textbook. Basically it says that thoughts are protected, but actions are subject to government regulation. And that is the approach that the court has taken. And that is, again, another Mormon case, the case of Reynolds versus the United States. I'll let you read more about that case in the textbook. But in Reynolds versus the United States, just as they did in Davis v. Beeson, that basically it said you can believe what you want in terms of polygamy, but you can't practice polygamy, or you can practice polygamy, but the state is well within its authority to criminalize or prohibit that practice. And so it's in Reynolds versus United States and also the Davis case where we see this belief action distinction. An individual can hold any religious belief. You can believe whatever you want to believe. However, when belief turns into action, government has the authority to regulate or even prohibit that action. And that's what the belief action distinction is. Now, these two lectures have basically set the stage for the cases that we're going to be discussing in lecture 3. And so the belief action distinction basically saying that you can believe whatever you want, but your actions can be regulated and even prohibited by the government. But the question is when is government justified in its regulation of religious action? Like when is it constitutionally permissible to tell somebody that they can't engage in that action that is motivated by religion? In other words, when is religious action not protected by the First Amendment? Okay. On the flip side of that, when is government not justified in regulating a person's religious actions? In other words, when is religious action protected by the First Amendment? Well, the cases that we're going to be reading, from Cantwell to Sherbert to Yoder versus Wisconsin to the Smith case and beyond, those are all cases that deal with this question. When is your religious practice protected by the First Amendment and when is it not? And the court tells us the court is the one who determines what is and is not protected by the First Amendment. So in conclusion, as we move towards the last lecture about the actual cases, keep in mind that just as we had a test for determining whether or not certain liberties in the Bill of Rights should be applied to the states, the court does the same thing in trying to determine which actions will be protected and which actions will not be protected. In other words, we need some religious free exercise standards. We need some religious free exercises tests, and we're going to get it. And that's what we're dedicating the next lecture to. So talk to you again soon.